Great chat. All right. Hello, everyone. Everyone joining us live and everyone who will be here later watching us via YouTube on repeat. I am Nicole, and I am one of the trustees for Fifth Element Free Church. We are so excited to have Abner and Katie back for their second sermon. Abner and Katie are from Sacred Waters Ministry, and they're going to talk to all of us about tending our inner and outer terrain. So I'm going to turn it over to them. I'm really excited to hear what you guys have to say today. Welcome.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Nicole. It's so good to be back. Seems like just the other day we were talking about water and how important it is, obviously, to our ministry, since we're calling it Sacred Waters Ministry. So that's one of the big elements that we'll be talking about today and how it relates to terrain tending. And Katie's also going to be talking about the same thing, but I'm probably going to be leaning more on the literal side of our terrain, meaning our garden space specifically, the ground, our environment. And then Katie's going to kind of do it more on a figuratively, if you will, as far as our terrain inside of our bodies and taking care of our health, our microbiome, so on and so forth. So did you want to say anything before I get started? No. Okay. So let's get started. So terrain, when we hear the word terrain, what do we think about? What is it that we mean? It's been used quite a bit lately. And so we're going to kind of give you our version of what it is. And I'm going to start off by just saying, in a general sense, it's really about the ground, obviously, the terrain that we step on, that we plant our food in, that we live upon, that kind of thing. So terrain for me is really our environment. What is it that we're creating? Our connection to the ground, our connection to earth, since that's what we're made of in a sense. So how well we take care of our terrain really has to do with our health and how well we're going to live our lives and our community and who we surround ourselves with. And another thing to think about when I think about terrain is not just the ground, but what's in the ground and how are we tending to that ground and really defining what it is that is in there that we're trying to engage with and really take care of and create an environment so that the living things that are in and around our terrain are happy and they're doing what they love to do and doing it the best that they can. And I always think about when I look at our garden space here is, what can I do today to make my terrain a better place? And so that's where we're going to start off with. So I don't know how many gardeners there's out there or farmers or anyone that is tending to terrain or tending to their space or garden space or their food or their plants or however you want to look about that. Right. That's right. So when I come out like this morning, what can I do to make it better? And I'm very fond of soil stewardship. You know, I teach some gardening classes, and the two main pillars are soil stewardship and terrain tending. And terrain tending, on a simple sense, as far as the garden is, to really be aware of what's happening in your space. Where's the sun shining? How much light does that part of the garden get? How much water does that part of the garden need or get or want? And space and air. Do I have enough air in my terrain? I don't want compaction, for example. I want fluffiness. I want a place where those microorganisms can thrive and my root systems can thrive and have enough room and space to maneuver themselves, to get that air, to get that water, to get those nutrients, whatever it is that they're looking for. So I want to start having you think in that context of, what do I do to make my terrain a better place to house my living organisms, plants, anything that's alive? Just like us, we need air, we need space, we need our nutrients. We kind of came up with this concept, at least something that I think about, is nurturing our nutrients, which is a big part of the terrain that I'm trying to create in my garden space so that the plants can thrive. Because if I have thriving plants, that means I'm going to have that thriving element inside my body and all parts of my body. So when I look at terrain, I think, what can I do to make it better so these microorganisms are happier so that they can create a better system underneath us in order for those plants to pull from and then I get the benefit from that beauty. You know, it's one thing to grow a tomato plant that's just trying to survive, and there's another thing to grow a plant that's actually thriving, and it's lush, it's happy, and it's doing its thing, and it's protecting itself from all the other little critters that shouldn't really be getting on it. And obviously, you know, it's a harmonious relationship really when you have a really sweet terrain tending situation going on. And yes, there's ups and downs, and you're always going to be surprised by the little critters that come up, or maybe just a little neglect on your side of, oh, you know what, I haven't really watered that plant in a little bit. Look what's happened to that terrain. And in essence, look what's going on with my plant. So it's a constant relationship in a sense that you have to have with your environment out there. And again, the better my environment in my space, in my ground, and let it be below ground or above ground. I'm also housing other bigger critters that want to be in my terrain, for example, raccoons or gophers or squirrels. And sometimes we want to maybe look at them as the bad guy or whatever that is. And when you really have a terrain that is thriving, there's actually abundance for everyone and everything. And so when you tend to your terrain, you have to think about it in that way. What am I doing to steward this or tend to this terrain so that I'm getting the best out of it? So are all the other critters and microorganisms that are engaging in that same space. Because there is enough for everybody, or at least you should be thinking about that in that way. So that when you do see another bigger critter eat your tomato, I mean, right now I have a little problem actually. Someone's eating my tomatoes and it's probably just a couple of critters that are really hungry and they love the tomatoes because they're really tasty. And so what can I do to protect a certain amount of them so they don't eat them all, for example? So you have to just be really aware of what's happening in your garden space. So you have to be in that space. Sometimes we plant our gardens and we think they're just gonna kind of do their own thing. You know, we either forget to go and check up on them, and or the most basic thing that I see with most of my garden clients is the lack of water that the plant's getting, and or how are they getting their water. You know, I mean, there's a lot of layers on how good can you actually tend to that terrain so that plant does the best that it can do. So giving your time and energy is obviously a big part of tending to your terrain. And there's a couple things that we kind of want to highlight before I keep going forward is water, light, nutrients, and air, or also called space. So those are the four things that we really want to hone in on when we think about tending terrain is the water level, how much water is actually in that space, and where is it within that space. And then when I use the word space, I'm also thinking about air. Air and space kind of coincide with each other. The more I can create air within my terrain or my pockets of spaces underneath the ground, the better it's going to be for all the critters inside the ground and above as well, because we're all trying to benefit from whatever it is that we're trying to cultivate in that terrain. And then light, really want to touch on light because a lot of people either forget it or they take it for granted. But the two things I look at when I'm trying to terrain, tend my space or any other space when I'm doing someone else's garden is where's the light shining and how much light is shining in that space, and really understand that the things that you are trying to grow or the things that you're trying to house, i.e. microorganisms or worms if you have worm castings, or in the sense of compost bin, vermicomposting, know how much is getting in there, how much light is actually trying to get in there. Is it too much? Is it too little? Is it too hot? Is it not hot enough? That kind of thing. Obviously in Southern California, we have it relatively easy. It's not very cold here, so we have a good amount of light throughout the year. I can only imagine what's going on in the winter times in the East Coast and such. But regardless of where you are, you have to know how much light is actually hitting that space and how much light does it need. And one of the things that Katie and I have been looking into is the light thing on many different levels. Um, and it's so important to think that light is actually food in a sense. We actually take in light and it's actually feeding us. It's actually keeping us alive. I mean, we can feel it in a sense intuitively. But when you really dive into it, it's really a big, big, important part of our health, especially in my garden space, to know how much I want to actually allow to hit my garden. And I have certain areas of the garden that I have plants that obviously require more light, and other areas that don't require as much light. But that is a really important one because the light has to do with, it influences, I should say, the water. And obviously the water in most cases is a tricky thing for most people. How much do I water? Am I watering too much? Am I watering too little? And is the water actually getting to where it needs to go? Because when I water a plant, it doesn't always mean that the plants, in this case, the roots are actually getting that water. Sometimes you water a plant and water tends to just go towards a certain direction unless you're actually really paying attention to where it goes and you want an even distribution of that water upon your terrain so that you expand the potential of how much that root can expand itself and grow and reach out and grab those nutrients. Just because you have nutrients in the ground doesn't mean the plant's getting them. And that's another point about tending terrain is there's one thing to have nutrients in the ground, and then there's another thing to know that your plants are actually absorbing those nutrients and benefiting from the nutrients. And that obviously has to do with the quality of the environment that is inside that ground, it's inside underneath the things that we don't see. So being able to know that my airspace and my water are kind of having this really harmonious relationship when I water my terrain or my ground or my soil, that I know that I'm getting an even distribution of that moisture in that soil so that you get the full benefit of that whole space. If you're only growing in a 4x8 garden box, I want all that space to be utilized by the plants and know that those roots are getting to all those areas. I want my water to know that it's filtering through all those areas so that my nutrients are happy and my microorganisms that are engaging with those nutrients are happy so that the roots can actually drink it and or eat it. And then you have beautiful plants. So there's a lot of layers there, but the main thing I really want to focus on is creating an environment in your garden space that is going to allow the things that are in that space, i.e., all the living things, and there's billions of microorganisms in there that are relying on us to house a space that's going to allow them to thrive. And so that's really our job, is to really take care of that space. It's not so much to take care of the plant, because Mother Nature does that. The microorganisms are the stewards of taking care of your plant. We're kind of responsible for taking care of that terrain so that all those living things in there are doing their thing and they're actually giving you what you want. And obviously your relationship will start to enlighten so that you can actually get the most out of all that time and energy that you're putting in there. And you'll be surprised once you get to a certain level of health within your garden space and your soil, and in this case, your terrain, it really does do its own thing. It really does start to take care of itself. It's only when we're not taking care of that terrain that we have issues and that we need to put more time and energy into something that is not working for you. My tomato plants are dying, they're yellowing, they're not putting out fruit or whatever it is. And you got to be paying attention to what it is. And the plants are speaking to us. You know, all living things, even a blade of grass, actually sings and they see us. They see shades of light and they recognize when we come close to them or that we're not coming close to them at all. And that has a direct influence on the output of what we're going to be getting from our terrain. So again, it's water, light, the nutrients, and the air/space that we always want to be checking on when we want to tend to that terrain. So there it is in a nutshell. Is there any questions? Maybe we can open up for a few questions on what that means, or if you want any clarity within that info.
I don't know that I have a question, but I was just really appreciative that you brought up that first kind of step, if you will, is the awareness of your space and like discovering what your needs actually are for that garden space. And I assume that's also gonna, dovetail in with the human body as well. Our internal world, external world. So I thought that was really a good notice.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's actually one of the main things that I do every morning I come out is like, where are things at? What happened last night? You know, I'm not really in my garden is that evening hour when I'm sleeping and I'm resting. And there's a lot of activity in the evening time in the garden space. There's a lot of magic that happens in the evening time. I mean, there is times where I'm actually out there in the evening because it's either hot in the day or I just want to see what's happening out there. I see the critters come, who's coming in, who's ripping my stuff up, who's digging holes in my ground.
Yeah. And when you said, some people just kind of plant the garden and let it do its thing, I feel like that's usually me when I've had a garden. I'm like, okay, I did my work. Now you go do your thing. And then I come back. And of course, it's like completely in disarray. And
Well, that's funny you say that because we take things for granted as humans, especially in this day and age. And in a sense, we're privileged or whatever it is. I mean, everyone's got their stuff, and we do just assume that if you put something in the ground and give a little water, it's going to run its course, and that's an assumption. You really have to cultivate that space and soil. I mean, I remember when I moved in here with Katie the first year and a half, maybe even 2 years, I was just creating soils and composting and just observing the space, knowing where I think I might want to grow something or not grow something or create an environment or shade something or before I even threw anything on the ground and just know the space and get familiar and be really aware of what's happening in that space. And then you can kind of make it yours. And then by that time, you're ready. You're ready to kind of let it do its thing, but you still want to chime in. For years I never had an irrigation system for my watering for the terrain because I've always thought I want to be there. I want to be there and water it all the time and know exactly how it's happening. And after a while, you have other stuff, or you have a kid, or you have a job, or you have a bigger garden, or whatever, and you're limited in the amount of time that you're actually able to put into it. So you create systems that kind of allow you to not be there all the time. But it's a balance. It's a balance of you want to be there, you want to breathe on your plants, the whole oxygen, carbon dioxide, that whole thing. It's like you want to engage and interact with your plants, but also have some harmony with your lifestyle.
yeah, that's really beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, Jordan, just like you, am I muted?
No, you're good.
Okay, just like you, I certainly felt a little bit convicted because I think I was guilty of doing some of that as well. You have good intentions at the beginning of the season and you go ahead and plant everything you want, and then life gets busy, you've got an irrigation system, and then before I know it, the strawberries have sent out shoots, and I go into to harvest some strawberries to find that possibly weeks ago, those shoots were sent out and there's no strawberries. So, but I did do the whole connecting the vegetable garden almost analogy to the physical body, because the same things apply. We take care of, it's important to take care of all those micro aspects of it for terrain health. So I really enjoyed that presentation. Thank you very much. It's very inspiring, convicting.
Well, I'm glad that you chimed in and you appreciated that. It's an important thing. I mean, that's what we think about all the time. And now that Katie's going to get into her thing, this would be a great bridge because she is going to be talking a little bit more about what you just touched upon is our terrain, our microbiome, our insides, our living that are happening. I mean, we are a living creature, and how we tend to our space inside of our bodies is, in a sense, our terrain. I know you guys might have not heard either a terrain theory, germ theory. I mean, we're not going to get into that, but the idea is that we are part of our environment. Just like I'm cultivating an environment for my microorganisms, for example, we're also taking care of our own terrain in our own bodies. And there is a relationship between the terrain that I'm cultivating in the garden and how that's going to influence my insights. Okay, you want to go?
Good morning, or almost afternoon for you guys. We're just at 8:25 a.m. here, and it's early in our garden. And this is actually a really good time to be in the garden. AB touched upon those tenets of water, nutrients, air, space, light. And when I think about terrain and our ecology, I think about how we fit into what he says. And one of the number one aspects of the human terrain is the quality of those things: air, water, light, and then nutrients are a byproduct, or what we're tending to through that air, water, and light. This time of day is one of the best times of day to be outside when we look at light and what light does for our body. And light feeds our mitochondria, and it feeds all of our cells. You may have heard that there are some people that simply look at the sun and that's their food for the day. So when we talk about that, it's like we can still look at junk food or whole, healthy, natural food. And the whole healthy, natural food in this case would be the sun. And the optimal sun time of day for that sun. So AB talked about the light and the quality of the light and where the light is in the space. And for us, that quality of light means that we limit our exposure to certain elements or certain aspects of or rays of light. And the other rays of light are going to energize our terrain, and then you have light that's actually going to hinder our terrain. And the light that's going to energize our terrain the most is an hour after sunrise. That next hour is the most optimal light for our body. And if we can get 20 minutes of that light or more, then we've actually began our day in a way that we're aware and we're connected to our own energy and our inner ecology. And only when we're connected to our inner ecology can we actually tend to the outer, because the outer is a direct reflection. And if we're going to be the creators, or we're tending to this life and this body that we've been given in this lifetime, then we must be connected from the inside out, creating from the inside out. Otherwise, we are letting others' creation influence our terrain. So it's like letting a guest gardener come into your garden who is from maybe the southern atmosphere, and they flip everything around. They invert it because, oh, well, where I come from, it was the north sun, not the south sun, or however that is. If we're not in causal energy around our own terrain, then we have our environment that is reflecting to us. And we are probably on the screen because we know that our environment is inverted and is not a healthy environment, with that environment being what is influencing. We want to create from the inside out, our inner ecology, and that's the subterranean space that AB is talking about. When that subterranean, the ground substance of the garden is healthy, then the garden thrives even if we go away for 3 days. So light, one of our number one foods. And then we move on to water. And AB talked about how the water moves through the space, what's actually receiving water or able to absorb water. And we have the same thing in our own body. Water, what's the quality of the water that we are ingesting? What's the quality of the water that we are tending our the outer layer of our terrain, our skin? Well, are we absorbing a lot of chemicals through our shower? Are we putting products on our skin. And so water. And I see Moshe's drinking right now. Awesome. That was our cue, everybody. Water,
Water
break.
break.
And what's the quality of that water? And that water we can also put in the light and charge with the light. So we begin to start to see this trail, how nothing is separate, and it's not one component, it's the combination of all of those components. So let's also look at air or space. We know the quality of the air we breathe is not the best, and we know that we can do things like filters in our home, but when we're just moving through life, we can't control the quality of the air, but we can control how we receive that. And one is just to receive our breath as the life we're given, and to receive that breath with gratitude, and know that trust that breath, trust the space that it creates within us, but trust that breath that it comes. It will come for you. And most of us are breathing unconsciously, and we're taking for granted that whether we think about it or not, the breath comes for us. Until one day it doesn't. And I think that I'd rather be consciously in a relationship to that which is moving me and animating me. And I imagine when I'm in relationship to that, no matter the quality of the air, the quality of the relationship to that breath and that air actually means more than the quality of the air. Just like when you're the terrain tender in the garden and you're tending to the space and the atmosphere within the space, that makes a difference. That's the relationship. So our relationship to not only the breath that we trust comes for us, but the spaciousness that it can create within us. And in that spaciousness, we allow the light and the water to feed us. And then the nutrients begin, just like AB said, like after a while, it takes on a life of itself. And what happens is all of the microorganisms in our body take on a life of themselves for themselves. They are life-giving to us, but we're stewards of those organisms. And when we don't balance our light and our air and our water in a conscious relationship, we begin to see illness. What we begin to see is microorganisms that we might not want to flourish, and other microorganisms, or they metamorphose. So we see more cells turning into bacteria that we don't want, and all of that influences how these cells are constantly changing. A virus cell and a virus exist in the sense that it's a state of an organism, and it's actually a cleanup state. So when we see something that on the outside would be called a virus, what we're seeing is the cleanup group coming in cleaning up the inner terrain. And it goes from that and it moves it back into a bacteria, and then it moves back into something else. And this is called pleomorphism. And the cells are morphing according to how the terrain is being tended. And the number one tending of the terrain, we look at light, we look at, like, keep saying the quality of. What I'm really speaking to is the frequency of. So when we tend, we actually amplify the vibration, and the vibration is what expresses our health. Just as you can feel when you come into our garden space that there's a vibration, there's a frequency, and it's not an abandoned, gone wild, rogue frequency. It's one that you feel there's intention, you feel that there's engagement. And we must engage in our inner world so that people meet us and they feel you engaging with them, but they feel your engagement with life. And when we can walk into a space and someone feels that you're engaging in life, then we create a frequency that they can attune to and also engage in life. And together, as we're all engaging in life, we're creating a different terrain for the human. The individual organism of human and the greater organism of human being.
I just want to chime in on that note that comes to mind. I believe that the essence of forming community or being in community is that relationship, and that you invite others to be part of that relationship, to be part of what they're feeling when they come into this space, or when they come into your presence, or in this case, when they're within that terrain together, is really the essence of what creates a bond and or a foundation to that community. When people come into the garden, they're automatically like, whoa, look what's happening right here. And it's not just that there's a lot of beautiful plants, but it's that they feel that there's that relationship with the space, all the space, above space, underneath the space, in between the space, and they're allowed to be within that space as well. And so when we invite someone to come into our space and enjoy the terrain, there is an attraction, there is a bond, there is a gratitude sensation, there is an energetic field that they feel that they're inside. You know, I'm sure we all know that we have a 6-foot space around us that is something that is us, something that our field, right? So they're sensing that not just within the human, but within the plant, within the kingdom, in a sense. And that's what is healing when people come into the space. And then you're absorbing that, and you want to take it in on all your senses. Smell, the visual, obviously, when they first come in, but also the taste. And then you start to ingest some of the things that are growing here. And then that's when you get the full experience of what it is to be within community, what it is to be connected with Mother Nature, and what it is to be, quote, healthy. That's it.
I like the back and forth. I don't like to just talk and talk. Which means that I can take a breath and receive the life I'm being given in this moment. And if anyone else wants to engage in the conversation, this would be a great time.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I loved what you said about the reminder that we don't have control over our surroundings all the time, but we can control how we receive it. I think that's really empowering in this world that we live in currently.
Yeah. And I think that that's the difference between being causal or being a victim. Yeah.
I agree. Tanya, you are muted now.
Still on mute, Tanya.
Thank you. I'm using my phone for Zoom and I never do, and I'm just not familiar with the way to go and do everything. So thank you for reminding me. I think there is a lot that people subconsciously perceive about a person, their space, even the garden, as you said. And I think there's so much beauty to what you both have just shared. I'm so glad I was on this call. It's subtle, but it's actually its power. It's so powerful because of its subtlety. Because you notice it's far-reaching. That's where it all happens, is in those different layers of our being, those finer layers. So very, very lovely. Thank you.
One thing for us to mention that we didn't mention that we actually were speaking of yesterday was this thing of beauty, the idea of something that's beautiful um, is really where love resides. So when I think personally about something that is that I'm in love with, or something that I love, it's really acknowledging the beauty that you're experiencing, the beauty that you see or smell or taste or whatever it is that you're experiencing with your senses, is this idea of creating beauty. And that's really the answer to a lot of the fears and issues and disharmony situations that we have in our lives right now. The lack of acknowledging the beauty that's around us. Because as soon as you can acknowledge beauty, let it be a plant or a flower, a child or food or whatever, when you acknowledge the beauty, and then you're actually being present, and you're actually falling in love with something, you're actually engaging with love, you're actually spreading love. But first you have to acknowledge it and see it and be present and be in a sense aware that it's there, and it's all around us, especially once you start to sense it, and then you can start to create it or manufacture or build something or whatever it is that is something that you like to do or your passion, to be able to know that, oh, I can make more of that. And again, that comes right back into this idea of community, where people are drawn to that and people want to engage and be part of that. And we can always do it exponentially when we're in a larger group of people. You know, we hear the idea of people power, and the power is when you have numbers, when you have more than just yourself creating something beautiful and then engaging with it and then sharing it. And, you know, the idea of receiving is such an important part, because once you create it and you're putting it out there, are people able to absorb? Just like, is that plant able to absorb the nutrients? Is that plant actually getting the water? Is it actually growing into the spaces that are in that soil? So being able to cultivate this idea of water and air and space and nutrients is so important, because those are the building blocks for the act of beauty, for the act of creating beauty, and then hence, you know, love. Because as we all know, love is the answer. What makes things work. Love is the healing. Love is what we want to be around, what we want to be in, literally in, engaging in it. So thank you for bringing that the idea of beauty and acknowledging the beauty around us, because there truly is so much beauty around us, and we just have to be present.
And I think just practicing that brief pause allows us to be much more mindful. And I've noticed that I've always been a praying person, but obviously in my younger years, you just pray because that's what you do before you eat. But how it's changed for me in about the last year is when you close your eyes and you immediately connect with that food you're about to eat. And instantly, talking about community, what comes to mind is from the conception of someone saying, I'm going to plant that food, the working the soil, the planting, the watering, the harvesting, the shipping, like just all the people that are connected from the very beginning to the moment it's on my plate is actually in the true sense awesome. So you're connecting, you know, that those people are probably putting food on their own plates because of the money that they have received along the process. It's just it's it's almost a worship-filled moment when you connect right through everything with humanity, the soil, the air, everything that unites it and brings it to pass. And you're about to now ingest that food. And of course, I always include that it is fully digested, the nutrients assimilated, completely eliminated, and just that whole harmony and flow. So my, that the rote prayer, excuse me, that I would have taken 12 seconds to just babble off because that is just what you do, turns into maybe 30, 45 seconds, maybe a minute of absolute connection. And I swear my food tastes better. I'm in complete harmony. So yeah, it's all connected, but it's just a lovely process and ties in with what you're saying.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. One thing that you mentioned that I really want to stress too is when we eat something, we're hoping that we're tending to our terrain. That means that my body's going to actually, well, chew it. Let's just start there. I mean, how many people just don't even chew their food enough? And that's where it starts. That's how the mindfulness starts, is it's entering my body. What am I doing in order to prepare this food so that when it goes in, all the way in, my body's gonna actually appreciate it. And it's not gonna look at it as something like, oh my God, what did you just throw in me? Look at this big clump of whatever it is. Did I do my job to actually chew that enough so that my body's actually able to absorb what I'm trying to put into it? Because the body's an incredible organism beyond words, that it can take something, grab what it needs, and then eliminate what it doesn't need. And our ability to keep this body in a certain state of health that allows it to do that well is really the essence of our health. It's like, am I actually absorbing what am I putting in? And is my body actually getting rid of it? Because all our cancers are things that sit in our body that can't get out, that shouldn't be in it. I mean, most of it. I'm not going to say all of it, but I truly believe that when someone is not in a good space or unhealthy or sick or whatever the term you want to use, it's the body's inability to cope with it. And it's our responsibility to take care of our terrain so that it's functioning at its best in order to take what it needs and get rid of what it doesn't, because I truly believe that there isn't waste. We come up with this word of waste, and it's really about us just finding a place that needs to go. I mean, think about all the food that we, quote, waste, rather than taking it to where it needs to be and having the terrain reabsorb it and make beauty of it. And it's our process, again, is creating these atmospheres and environments where we create this cycle of it being utilized and reused. And right now we're such a consumer-based society that we just consume and disregard rather than nurture. This idea of nurturing nutrients, it's really about nurturing our culture so that we're thinking this way and that we're moving forward as a civilization in a positive way, and not just consumption, create. I don't know where the byproduct goes, but let's just put it over there to the side and then, create these ugly situations. I mean, obviously we see the plastic industry where they can create something and then just throw it wherever and think that it's going to be okay, and it's not. So we have a certain responsibility to take care of that terrain, let it be the planet Earth, my ground in my garden, my microbiome, whatever it is, and know that I have a responsibility so that everything has a purpose. Yes.
Thank you, AB and Katie. I appreciate your wisdom and what you've shared. I'm sorry I got here late, so I missed the first 15 minutes, but I'm sure I'll go back and listen to the recording. But what you said about having a right relationship with what you're taking in is so important, and what you've been touching on and talking about here. And I've long believed that it's not about as much the quality of the food that we eat, so much as our belief about what it's going to do to us, what it's going to do for us. And even if even if we don't have access to the very best food, the very best qualities of food or water, we can pray over it, like Tanya said, we can make sure that we are in right relationship with it. And I believe that it is much better for us when we do that. And so I recently, I actually recently struggled with this when I got a very expensive water treatment system for my home, where it's a very fancy filter, and it charges the water, makes it alkaline, and it's like a Kangen and all this stuff. And so I suddenly became a snob about my water, and then whenever I had to go drink non-living water, you know, from my fancy system, then it was hard for me to get into right relationship with that water, because I'm like, oh, now I'm drinking all the water with all the heavy metals and the whatever it is. And so that was definitely a struggle for me to remember that I can still be in right relationship with something, even, you know, even after I have access to something better.
It's interesting. It's interesting you say that, because it kind of correlates. I was talking about at the very beginning with the garden segment, is if you have a good terrain in your garden, you can have little bad stuff going on, and it's going to be okay. You know, I mean, that's what immunity is all about, right? Is that you can take in a little negative or a little bad or whatever you want to call that, something that maybe shouldn't be in it, or you shouldn't engage with, or you shouldn't absorb or take in or whatever. But overall, if you're looking at your terrain and it's healthy, those little things are okay. Those little things are what actually boost our ability to make it okay or make it good. You know, Katie talked about like a virus. It's just in a different state. It's a cleanup time. You know, when we take something that's not, quote, that good for me, it just makes me better. It makes me being able to get over that hump and prove that, hey, I'm actually healthy. Right?
Well, this is what I was going to bring as an example. When we're interacting with the world that isn't the world we create here, and even sometimes here, because we have a lot of gatherings and people will bring food, and my belief system around that is so much stronger than AB's. Like, he just literally expressed his belief system. He will almost eat anything and be super unaffected by it in any, like, a very neutral experience for him. And because my belief system is so strong, and it's similar to what you were saying, Moshe, about how, you know, you become a water snob. I'm like, I can't eat that. We're gonna let our son eat that. Like, and I will literally then feel not good, and it proves that I can't eat that. And he's like, you need to eat it, like, da 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 da. And then he's eating whatever, and this man hasn't been sick in 25 years, and I am getting over pneumonia, right? You know, so it's like our terrain. When we talk about space, we're also talking in air, we're talking about the mind on our inner terrain, and our mind and what we're creating for ourselves is part of that terrain. Each of our realities, and I talked about not letting the outer influence, but we also have to be careful of the inner, and our inner, and how our inner is influencing us. Yeah. And that is bringing prayer and mindfulness over dogma and strong beliefs. Years ago, one of my teachers was doing like muscle testing, and she'd be like, da da da, and everybody would, and then mine tested so strong, and she's like, it was like artificial sugar in a packet, in an envelope. And everybody was like, oh yeah, it doesn't, and my belief system in that whole group was the strongest around food. This is like 20 years ago, but I still like, oh no, I would never consume that. And so the muscle testing, like, she couldn't get me to accept it. And the whole lesson that day was about blending with source and knowing that all of it is actually a creation of creation. And when we can take that in and we are a part of that creation, and we are one with that, then we really don't get affected in the same way as when we have a resistance to it and we're not seeing it as part of the whole and already a part of us. So I can be a water snob too, but I've learned to, before I consume something, see how neutral I can allow myself to become so that I can receive the beauty that is within even some of these things that we could list as poison.
Well, we're almost time's up, but we have a few more minutes. If anybody else wants to share, ask a question, acknowledge, or anything like that, this would be a good time.
I also just want to say thank you for showing up and being a part of our terrain today, and that this conversation will influence us for the rest of the day, and have us all kind of thinking. And look at Tanya cooking now within this container, and she'll be absorbing this conversation and what's been illuminated in her field.
Yeah.
And may we all just receive the life that we are given and tend to the nuance of our each unique vibration so that it's most optimal.
Yeah.
Not someone else's most optimal, but your most optimal.
Yes, thank you guys. I will go ahead and link your website for everyone so that if they want to check out what you're doing in California, they can. I have the Little Shepherds website. Do you have another one also?
Yeah, you can use the littleshepherds.earth or
KatieDove.love.
yeah, katiedove.love. And then I'm at domogardens.com. I've been so busy, I haven't really been putting up too many events here. I've been making other events happen around town, but you can
Yeah.
definitely come in and connect there
As
too.
far as the gardening, you would look
Yeah,
duomogardens.com.
domogardens.com.
How do you spell that?
DUOMO
Okay.
gardens plural.com.
Awesome. So everyone go check them out. And if you haven't checked out Katie and Abner's first sermon, I can't remember when it was, but it's been a little while. It was on water, and I highly recommend you check it out. It was an amazing sermon.
Very
I
cool.
haven't looked at it. It's on our YouTube
Awesome.
channel. Yeah.
So much, everybody. Have a great day. And my birthday's tomorrow, by the way. So go ahead and wish me a spirit happy birthday tomorrow.
Happy birthday.
Happy early birthday.
I'll be
27.
No, I was gonna be 57, but it feels like 27.
That's what matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Have a great day.
Okay. Thank you all, and we'll see you all next month.
Okay,
Thank
bye.
you so much.
Bye.
Bye.